No, it's just easier so I'm not tethered to the hanging lighting from low on the floor.
Richard.
Yeah.
I'm Tom.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You feeling that right as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And am I okay to check? Is that how it will look?
Well, that's how when he walks in. When we get to the
No, I can hear you now.
like that.
Sorry, I didn't quite see it when you said you walked in.
We'll sound a bit wider so I can see him come in.
Yeah, fine. I mean, if we could, if we keep it tight to the end of that grey screen.
No problem. No problem.
You've got the other button back now.
But I can just wait. If you really want, I can just do it then and just
No, I
look
mean,
here.
fine to be a bit wider, but yeah, I think just as long as you've got edge of that green, the grey screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear. Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, that's fine. Cheers. Thank you.
You've
7 minutes past 11.
got about 18 minutes.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. So it's going out to the pool now.
I'm going to make my excuses.
Good morning. This is a critical moment in our battle against coronavirus. Yesterday there were 55,000 new infections. 32,000 people were in hospital with COVID. And tragically, over the weekend, 1,600 people lost their lives to this dreadful virus. In the months to come, I want to set out the better, fairer Britain I know we can build together. But between us and that better future stands a huge national effort. And today, I want to focus on that. In the here and now, the government's task is clear: to deliver the vaccine as quickly and as safely as possible, and to secure the economy by protecting family incomes and supporting businesses. As the vaccine is rolled out, we all have a part to play. We have to stay at home. We have to follow the guidance. And we have to protect our amazing NHS. I appreciate how hard another lockdown will be for the millions who are juggling childcare with working at home, for young people when the school gates are closed, and for businesses that aren't allowed to open. We all want to see our loved ones. We all want to reclaim our lives. But we have a job to do first, as a people and as a country. In the race between the virus and the vaccine, our task is to do everything we can to suppress the virus. I know the British people will rise to that challenge, because this has been a time of national solidarity and heroism. From our care workers, our delivery drivers, our posties, our shop workers, and our lifesavers in the NHS. We've seen extraordinary achievements from British science, British business, research and manufacturing. And there have been extraordinary acts of kindness and compassion. We've seen the best of the British people in the most difficult of times. If only the British people had a government that was worthy of them. But I'm afraid the Prime Minister and the government have been found wanting at every turn. Even in the best of times, you can't be indecisive in government. In the worst of times, indecision can be fatal. Every time there's a big decision to make, Boris Johnson gets there too late. He was too slow to lock down in March of last year, too slow to protect our care homes, too slow to save jobs and businesses, and too slow to get protective equipment to the front line. In the summer, he ignored the warnings to prepare for a second wave. In September, he ignored the science and delayed a circuit break, only to introduce a longer lockdown a month later. And in December, there was the debacle about household mixing over Christmas. And then, when he was told by his scientists on the 22nd of December that a national lockdown was needed, he delayed again for nearly 2 weeks. The indecision and delays of the Prime Minister cost lives, and they cost people's jobs. The British people will forgive many things. They know the pandemic is difficult, but they also know serial incompetence when they see it. And they know when a Prime Minister simply isn't up to the job. The government says it's trying to balance the health crisis with the economic crisis. Yet we ended 2020 with one of the worst death tolls in Europe and the deepest recession of any major economy. That's not bad luck. That's not inevitable. It is the consequence of the Prime Minister's repeated delay and incompetence. As we start the new year, we need a new approach and a new national contract. The British people stay at home and help get the virus under control. In return, the government delivers on their priorities by delivering the vaccine and securing the economy to protect family incomes and support businesses. The first priority is to get Britain vaccinated. This is now the only way out of the darkness. Thanks to our brilliant scientists, we were the first country in the world to get the vaccine. Let's be the first in the world to get our country vaccinated. That must be the focus for all of our efforts, the biggest peacetime project in our history. We need round-the-clock vaccine programmes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in every village, in every town, every high street and every GP surgery. We all need to play our part. Government, businesses, our armed forces, public services and tens of thousands of volunteers coming together like never before. The government says it can deliver 2 million doses a week by the end of the month. I hope they do so. And let's hold them to that and help them with that. And then we must deliver even more and double that target in February. This isn't just about government, it's about all of us. So let's sign up to volunteer, let's roll up our sleeves, quite literally, and do everything we can in a truly national effort. Because every day we're stuck in this nightmare of lockdowns and closures. It's another day that we can't see our families, our friends, and our loved ones. It's another day that we can't enjoy everything the world has to offer. And it's another day that our economy and our country is held back. This pandemic has taken at least 80,000 lives. It's cost the NHS £1 billion a week. The UK economy £5.3 billion a week. And it's seen job losses running at 23,000 a week. So the quicker we can get the vaccine rolled out, the quicker we can recover and rebuild. Until then, the government must secure the economy to protect family incomes and support businesses. A family has always been incredibly important to me. It meant everything to my parents that I was able to get on, to go into law and to lead a public service, the Crown Prosecution Service. It meant everything to me that the NHS was there to care for my mum when she desperately needed it. And it means everything to me now that I have a loving family of my own. So when I think of the economy, I think of how it affects families, people worried about paying the bills, covering childcare, or coping with insecure work. When I think of public services, I think of the families relying on our NHS or on our schools. And when I think of Britain, I think of the hopes and ambitions of millions of families across the country. So it makes no sense to me at all that when we're asking so much of the British people, the government is doing so little to support families. Working parents have been left once again to juggle childcare and work. That's hard on the kids. It's hard on the school staff. And it's tough on every parent. For those who can work at home, it's difficult. But for those parents who can't work from home or don't have a partner to share the load, it can mean the difference between keeping their job and looking after their family. So the government should go further to support working parents by creating a legal, enforceable and immediate right for parents to request paid flexible furlough and promoting that right to all working parents to help them get through this lockdown. The government also needs to go further to protect family incomes. We're in one of the worst recessions for 300 years. Yet the Prime Minister and the Chancellor want to hike council tax by £1.9 billion bombshell that lands a bill of around £90 on every family. They also plan to cut universal credit, taking £1,000 a year from millions of families and pulling another 200,000 children into poverty. On top of that, they want to freeze pay for millions of key workers who've got us through this crisis, including our armed forces, our care workers, our teachers, and our firefighters and police officers. This shows that the government isn't just incompetent, but also that it has the wrong priorities. This is the government that gave Dominic Cummings a £40,000 pay rise, but won't pay our carers a decent wage. This is the government that wasted £22 billion of taxpayers' money on a testing system that doesn't work and now can't find the money to support families. And this is the government that sprayed money on private contracts that didn't deliver, but won't give councils the support that they need. That's why I'm calling on the government today to put families first during this lockdown by backing local councils to prevent council tax rises, stopping any cut in universal credit, extending the ban on evictions and repossessions, and giving our key workers the pay rise that they deserve. I know this isn't everything that's needed, and that after so much suffering, we can't go back to business as usual, to an economy where over half our care workers earn less than the living wage, where childcare is among the most expensive in Europe, where our social care system is a national disgrace, and where over 4 million children grow up in poverty. But taking these steps now would make a real difference to millions of people across the country and would put families at the heart of our recovery. The next major priority over the coming months is supporting businesses. Businesses are the engine of our economy. They're not just a source of good jobs and prosperity, but also of pride and of dignity. My dad was a toolmaker. He spent his whole life on the factory floor. So I know that when businesses are forced to close, to pull out of high streets, or leave communities they've been part of for years, it doesn't just affect profit. It affects people. It affects our communities. And it affects our country. We should all be immensely proud of the role British businesses have played in this pandemic, from keeping our shelves stacked and producing protective equipment to helping to develop and distribute the vaccine. And when we come out of this crisis, I want Britain to be the best country to do business in. High tech, high skilled, high paid, and looking to the future. Building in Britain and trading with the world. But if we're to do that, the government needs to protect British businesses and to protect people's jobs now. That's why Labour's calling for the creation of 400,000 good jobs in low carbon sectors. Because this recovery has to be a green recovery. A high streets fight back fund to protect our local shops and retail. Because Britain can't reopen if our towns and high streets are closed. And for the government finally to close the huge gaps in support for the self-employed. Because if we're to rebuild our economy, we need the dynamism and creativity of everyone. To have excluded 3 million self-employed people last March was unfair. To do it again in the autumn added insult to injury. To continue now into the new lockdown is totally unforgivable. The package I have set out today shows Labour's priorities for the new year. Because in 2021, we need to write a new chapter in our national story. Britain shouldn't have been one of the highest death tolls in Europe and have the deepest recession. We shouldn't be facing the slowest recovery. And we shouldn't be suffering the tragedy of so many deaths every day from this virus. That we are is a mark of the serial failures of this government and how badly the British people have been let down. There will be hard months ahead, but the seasons will turn. A dark winter will give rise to a brighter spring. And when it does, I know that together we can build a better future, a country worthy of the sacrifices of the British people, just as we did in 1945, when Attlee's government built the welfare state from the rubble of war. We can restore pride and prosperity in every village, every town, every city, and every part of our United Kingdom. We can secure our economy, protect our NHS, and rebuild Britain so that it is the best country to grow up in and the best country to grow old in. In the months ahead, I'll be setting out Labour's vision for that better future and how we can build it together. For now, let us come together to walk through the darkness, safe in the knowledge that our scientists, our NHS, and the power of our solidarity will win out. Thank you. We'll now go to questions from the media, please. I think we should have Laura Kunsberg from the BBC first. Laura, good morning.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sir Keir. You said we must all play our part, we must all stay at home. But do you think the government should tighten restrictions still further, whether that's banning households mixing at all, for example, or closing nurseries?
Well, Laura, we're obviously at the most serious stage. I think all the messaging this morning is that this week and possibly next week are going to be the worst, and that calls for the most serious of restrictions. I think there probably is more that we could do. An example is the question of whether nurseries should be open. There are other examples, and we may have to get tougher. But I think that the most important thing, if you like, is the message to people to stay at home, because that message and compliance with that message, it appears to me, were much stronger last March than it is now. And I'd like to see the Prime Minister out every day at daily press conferences, ramming home that message to stay at home. So, yes, we may need to look to tougher measures, but I think above all else, it's that critical messaging, stay at home, get back to the spirit of March, because this really is going to be, this week, the next few weeks, like to be the darkest weeks that we've faced during this pandemic. Thank you, Laura, very much. I think we're going to go to Shahab Khan of ITV next. Shahab.
So again, a couple of quick questions, if I may. The government has spent huge amounts during the pandemic, which at some point will have to be paid back. In your speech, you talk about securing our economy. How do you plan on paying for all that money that's been spent on things like the furlough scheme? And also, Chris Whitty today has been saying that it's the most dangerous time in the pandemic. What extra measures do you think the government should be taking? And how long do you think these restrictions should be in place? Well, at the end of this, should we be going back to the tier system?
Shahab, on the measures I've set out today, they are the measures that I think are needed here and now to get families and businesses through the next few weeks. And they need to be put in place urgently, because otherwise the cost will be in lost businesses and in lost jobs. And for working parents struggling with children at home, if these measures aren't put in place, it's going to be very, very tough. So that's the immediate issue. Of course, there is a borrowing issue for the longer term, but we have to secure protect families and businesses in this time. On the restrictions, as I said to Laura, this is the most serious stage of the pandemic, and therefore we have to face the most serious restrictions. There may be more that we can do. We need to hear what the scientists have to say about that. But that stay-at-home message is so important in this. And I'm afraid, one of the problems we've had in the last 9 months is the mixed messaging coming from the government that has made it so much harder. The vast majority of the British public will comply with the rules, will do what's asked of them, but they need absolute clarity as to what those rules are. As for how long the restrictions should stay in place, we're just going to have to see how quickly we can get people vaccinated. The government has set a target of 13 to 14 million by mid-February. We'll hold them to that, but we will also help them with that. I want them to succeed, as I'm sure everybody does, and to give everybody confidence to have the vaccine, which is the only way out of this. Thank you, Chehab, very much indeed. I think we're going to Kate McCann now at Sky. Kate.
Hi, Sir Keir. Thank you very
Morning.
much. The government is talking quite a lot about compliance, but the data does show that in most cases people are sticking to the rules. In fact, they are being given more freedom than they were in the first lockdown. So is this criticism of the public fair, do you think? And can I just push you a little bit on what you said to Laura Koonsberg just then? You did suggest that perhaps nurseries could be closed. What other tougher restrictions would you like to see introduced, and how would they get the number of cases down? Thank you.
Kate, on the question of the second part of your question, what more can we do? The question, we need to see the evidence behind nurseries, but I think a lot of people would be quite surprised that primary schools are closed and nurseries are open. So that needs to be looked at. There are other examples, I think, that would surprise people, and that is, to give you one small example, it is still possible at the moment, as I understand it, to go and view houses if you're going to buy a house. And that wasn't allowed last March. So we're in this extraordinary situation, if you like, where having got to at least as serious, if not a more serious position than in March of last year, we've got lesser restrictions in place, and we need those in place as quickly as possible. I do think, to go back to the first part of your question, that the vast majority of the public are complying with the rules. They have had mixed messages, and that hasn't helped. It really hasn't helped. I've seen myself individuals and families struggling with what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. But we do need, I think, to all of us, Prime Minister in particular, daily press conferences in my view, but all of us, my role as Leader of the Opposition, to carry the message, stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives. And that, above all else, is really important in this. I do think it's time to hear from the scientists what else could be done, and that probably should be done in the next few hours. Thank you, Kate, very much indeed. Let me go to Kate Ferguson this time at The Sun.
Hi, Mr. Keir.
Kate.
Hi.
And congratulations, by the way. I think you've been promoted, which is great.
Thank you very much. Your predecessor, Tony Blair, has been in talks with Matt Hancock about how to handle the pandemic, and he's reportedly considering a return to frontline politics. So, Keir, I wondered what you thought of that. Would you welcome his return? And are you taking advice from Tony about how to approach the pandemic?
Well, Tony Blair's done a lot of work on the vaccine and the pandemic, and I know he's been talking to the Health Secretary. And my message to everybody is to step up and do what we can. We've all got a responsibility to ensure that that vaccine is delivered as quickly and as safely as possible. And I think the more advice and support we can get from anyone, the better in this. And this is one of those areas where the government and the opposition are on completely the same page. We all want this vaccination programme to be rolled out as quickly as possible. And Tony Blair and his institute have done a lot of work on this. They've published some reports, and I think we can all be in discussions with Tony Blair and others about how we take that forward. But my strong message is everybody step up, everybody play your part, and that includes all of us putting our shoulder to the wheel to make sure this vaccine is rolled out just as quickly as possible. I saw an incredible example of that at a vaccine hub last week in Newham, where you had volunteers, you had doctors, you had community workers all coming together to get as many people through that hub as possible. And that's the spirit that we need to conjure up here in this national effort. Kate, thanks very much. And as I say, congratulations yourself on the promotion. Jim, I think we're going to at the FT.
So, Keir, just to ask about restrictions again, there's been a suggestion in the last 24 hours that maybe the government will make people wear masks outdoors or wear masks in offices. Is that something that you would support? Also on the schools front, you were a little behind the curve a week ago when the government closed the primary schools. A lot of children are still going to key worker schools. The classes are quite large. Do you think that there should be tighter restrictions to limit that use of classes to families where both parents are key workers? And if I could just sneak in another question, do you think the furlough scheme should be extended to the summer?
Jim, that's 3 for the price of 1, I think. On masks outdoors and the particular measures, I would defer to the experts on this. And I think the experts, and I've spoken to them a number of times, would say what happens indoors is much more important than what happens outdoors. And therefore, obviously be led by them on this. But I think we are going to have to look in the next 24 hours or so, what are the other measures that could be put in place? And hear from the scientists as to which of those that they think are more effective, and then all pull together and support those measures if they're needed, because the numbers are still, as everybody knows, heading in the wrong direction. I think your second question was about about schools and the number of children going in. I've heard stories about more children being in this time than last March, and we're going to have to look at that, I think, as to why that is. Because the rules pretty much were the same in March, and therefore we'll have to look at that. I haven't seen the final numbers school by school. Anecdotally, I've obviously heard that there are more children in, and we're going to have to look at that, I'm afraid. And as for how long the measures and the sport goes on, I don't think anybody can give a definitive answer to that, because the vaccine is really the only way out now. And so the sooner we can get that vaccine rolled out, the better, particularly to the 4 top categories, which is what the government wants to achieve by mid-February, and I want them to achieve that. So thank you very much, Jim. And then I think we're going to David at PA. David.
Sir Keir, just going back to Kate's question, have you personally spoken to Tony Blair about his approach to the pandemic? And would you welcome Tony Blair to serve in an incoming Labour administration if you win the next election? And if you do win that next election, a lot of the responsibility for repairing the finances will fall on that government. You called for increased spending again today. Do you have any idea how you would go about balancing the books?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've spoken to a huge number of people about the pandemic, like most other politicians and many other people in public positions. Spend almost all of every day talking to people about the pandemic, particularly scientists. The Prime Minister has given me access to the government scientists. We've got access to our own scientists and our experts. We talk to them all the time. I have spoken to Tony Blair. He put a report out last week, or a follow-on report to the first one. But I've spent many hours of many days talking to many people about the pandemic, and I will continue to do so because I want to hear from anybody who can help us through this and to ensure that I'm as best informed as possible. As to the longer term, obviously the level of debt is much higher than it's ever been before, and there are going to have to be long-term answers as to how we repay that. What I've been setting out today is not so much the long-term issue, but the short-term issue of how do we get through the early months of 2021 and where do we need more support, particularly for families, for businesses, in the way I set out in the speech today. So thank you very much, David. And I think that's the end of the questions from the media. So thank you all very much.